This time, rumors about the DJI Goggles 2 and the O3 Air Unit. What do we got?
Yeah, so we've got a post from Deals Drone and a post from Avada LV, our two main Twitter DJI leakers, who typically are correct or at least have good information. So the first one is from Deals Drone, and he says Air Unit is coming soon. We know that the O3 Air Unit is coming soon, but the new goggles, the Goggles 2, will have a Lite version. The Lite version will be like the Goggles 2, but they'll remove the touchpad and the head tracking, and that's what he's got as far as info there. And I did confirm this from another source. This does exist, the Lite goggles. He didn't give me any more info than what's here. But I was kind of wondering if they're going to remove more than the touchpad and head tracking and try to make this like a cheaper option to get in, you know.
Well, theoretically, the goggles, the V2 FPV goggles are the cheaper option. Like you speculated maybe they would put an LCD screen instead of an OLED screen. And I'm like, well, they kind of already have that goggle, don't they?
Kind of, that is true. Yeah. It depends on what we imagine the life cycle of the V2 will be. And if they will, like the rumors said a few months ago, if they will eventually end the V2, or if they are going to continue to plan on it. Like if they do the backwards compatibility in the Goggles 2, like we talked about, like they promised in December, then that we might see the sunset on the V2, because there's not really a reason to have the V2 if the Goggles 2 can do everything.
Yeah. I mean, that would also be the sunset of the Vista and the Air Unit then. I mean, that would all go together.
Backwards compatibility, right? So that's the thing.
They did. You're right. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
They promised it. They haven't done it yet, but they promised it.
Yeah.
Okay. That's interesting. I mean, I'm all for saving money, and it does sound like, I don't know about the touchpad. Like, fine, take the touchpad out, give me a joystick, I don't care. But it sounds like they're taking out some of the things that are basically used with the Avada for FPV pilots.
Yeah.
Although Mad Max FPV says a head tracker costs like 50 cents, and the touchpad probably costs like $1.
That's part of why
what
I'm
are they really doing?
About other things being removed, because a Lite, it doesn't really seem like much point in just removing a couple small components to the goggles, you know.
Yeah.
So, and then because this takes extra work, because then they have to produce a new SKU and produce boxes and like track them and stock them. Like there's got to be a reason. So yeah, for me, I think you're going to see more missing. I just don't know what that more is, right?
And we don't know a price on these either, so we can't really even begin to speculate.
Yeah.
Okay. But we know that they exist. All right. And then we've also got this post from Avada LV. No check mark for Avada LV. Interesting. So it seems like a whole lot of verified accounts I've been seeing on Twitter lately. I don't know. So weird. Well, anyway, probably not worth mentioning. Avada LV says that a new O3 Air Unit coming in next week and a new goggles compatible with it. A light version without touchpad but direction. I mean, I would take direction button over a touchpad, frankly. We've had rumors about the release date of the O3 Air Unit before, Blunty. You think this one's legit or for real?
We're so close. I think that this, along with the other back-end rumors that I've heard, it is likely to release the week of the 21st, which is next week. We had heard the 17th. That was the last running number, like, as of, I would say, 3 or 4 weeks ago. And then as of a few weeks ago, I'd heard that got pushed to the week after that. So that would follow this week. And then we're still hearing that up to this date. So I would assume that we will see that O3 Air Unit launch the week of the 21st. I would just say, as a broad idea, I feel like DJI is not very confident in this product. Because every other DJI product, we get tons of leaks and information, and there's tons of people have it on their desk or testing it or got this and that, and we've seen very little of that. So to me, like that shows they don't have much confidence in it, or there's like another idea for how they do marketing on that product. Because I don't know. Every other thing we've seen launch, like the DJI the FPV drone. And also with the Avada, we saw so many early leaks and people talking about it and pictures from underside and overside and around. And we've seen a little bit of that with the O3 Air Unit, but as far as legitimate final pictures, we haven't really seen that many. And it hasn't seemed like a concerted leak push, from that side of things.
Was there a concerted leak push for the original Air Unit?
I
Like,
wasn't around, so I can't tell you that. I
yeah,
don't know.
and I'm having trouble remembering. If
Yeah,
I'm trying to decide if DJI handles their FPV product releases a little bit differently than their sort of mainstream drones.
sure.
And I can't remember if there were like a lot of leaks and so forth, or if it was all just kind of under and then it was out. Um, I don't know about that. It will be great if when it finally comes, we will know things about the size, the price, the image quality, and so forth. I mean, we know some of these things because there are people who are taking the air unit out of the Avada and sticking it on drones. I know at least one, maybe two people who've done this just so
Yeah,
they can get a drone that flies like in a freestyle drone or a bigger drone.
yeah. The other thing to mention is it seems like from what we're hearing, the Lite SKU will not be available as of next week. So if you want to use the O3 Air Unit with its full 1080p, you will need to have Goggles 2, the current ones, which costs whatever, I don't think they have an individual SKU actually still, but I think they're going to be $600 or $700, when they release a standalone as far versus the Lite. Which, yeah, we don't know when that'll come out, but most people will probably want to buy that because they're not going to use the extra features, but that may not be out with the O3 Air Unit. So that's something to consider.
Okay. Okay. It's exciting to know. I've heard prices for the O3 Air Unit. I've heard rumors in the $250 to $300 range, which
Yeah.
is significant uptick from the current one. Although some people have argued that if it lets you get rid of your GoPros, then that's actually a net savings.
Yeah.
Would you
There
take
was that.
a? Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say that 250 to 300 comes from that singular leak we had a while back where they posted all the prices for all the units. And I believe their prices were correct for the Avada and for the other pieces of the bundles and stuff. So if that does follow, they had a range versus a single price, but 250 to 300, I do think that probably will be accurate.
So would you take the image quality of the Avada over a GoPro? I mean, you don't fly a ton of 5 inches, do you? To
I
begin
also
with,
don't fly like action cams when I do fly 5 inches. But I don't have a need for the action cam.
you're not the
So
audience. Would you pay? Would you
no.
pay $300 for this thing? The Avada's
Yeah.
image quality,
Yes.
penetration, etc.
Yes. Yeah, because it's like, especially well, okay. Here's what I'll say. I have V1 goggles, so no. But
Or you can't bind to them.
if you're most of the audience who's going to have a V2 goggle that should have an update on release to be able to bind with these, then yes, I think it's probably worth buying one of these. Like even with the fact that you're not getting too much difference in like increased like image, I think the fact that you're getting the increased penetration from the dual band and from the new technology and from the new chip, I think all those are going to be enough to make it quite a different experience.
Yeah.
And I don't know. One's not going to break the bank if you're already buying air units and Vistas. I think you try one, you see how different it is, you see what it really changes, and then you kind of go from there if you're already an existing owner of the system.
Yeah. Will the V2 goggles, the older FPV goggles, be able? We know that they don't have the 1080p resolution. They only do 810p. Fine. Will
Yeah.
they also have the increased range, or do they also have the increased range of penetration because of the dual band, etc.? They do the dual band with the FPV drone.
Yeah, we
So,
would assume for the same reason the V2s can work with the Avada, I would assume like it'll all be the same idea. Like I don't think there's any difference in signal with the Avada on the V2 and the goggles too.
yeah.
But yeah, to my understanding, it's not there's no they should operate the same way. There's no internal differences. Like the chipset may be different, but the actual function of it and how they're communicating should not be different as far as that stuff goes.
Okay. Well, I'm sincerely curious because I remember when the original DJI FPV system came out, and it was $160 ish for the video transmitter and the camera, and that was such an uptick from what analog, even expensive analog stuff would be. $50 for like a Unify VTX and $45 for like a high end camera. It was such an uptick. It was 2x to 3x, but it was like, okay, it's 2x to 3x, but you got HD, you got digital, and a lot of people jumped on it, more than I thought. So here we're going now to a speculated $250 to $300 price range, which is another uptick. My God, $300 used to be an entire $200 used to be an entire quadcopter. $300 you could get an analog quad for. You're basically paying quadcopter prices for just the video transmitter and the camera. And yet, I wonder if I'm going to be surprised yet again at how many people end up just buying this for their whole fleet and converting over to it. Rich people, probably.
Well, I mean, I think if you look at the amount of people who have 10 5-inch drones for no reason, or even 4.
What do you mean no reason? Right? I have a good reason for all of them.
My viewpoint would be, if you could spend $300 to $400 for another build to test out your different motors or do a different frame build or whatever you've got going on, you can sacrifice one of those to have better video. I mean, I don't know. I mean, those people are all going to make their own decisions, but where my head is at is I would gladly give up a drone or two to have better quality video, better penetration, all those kind of things.
I see your argument. Your argument, I see. You went a different direction. I thought where you were going was, if you have 10 quadcopters, then that's $3,000. That's an extra $1,000 that you have to pay to get the new one. But your argument is that's only like 2 or 3 fewer quads, and you get much better video and range of penetration. That's interesting.
Yeah. If you're already slinging a new quad all the time and like, hey, I want to build a new quad, I'm going to buy a new quad. Like, it shouldn't be that difficult for you to go. Like, instead, I'm going to save a quad and buy a Air Unit. So,
Plenty, does anybody know? I don't know if you know the answer. I know I don't. The DJI FPV remote controller, the gray one, works with the Avada. Do we know if it is rumored to also work with the standalone O3 Air Unit? Does anyone know?
My understanding is it does not at all.
So that surprises me because, I mean, if it works with the Avada, it's binding to the Air Unit to work with the Avada. Why wouldn't it work with the standalone?
Well, you might remember we got promised that we would get motion control support on the original Air Unit in Vista, and I think it was an original Dobo video by a DJI executive. I think it could have bound. I think it could have bound if they wanted it to bind at any point. But I don't like that. That's where I'm going with that. I don't think it has anything. I think there's nothing you can really do with it because they don't own the quad. Like, what data?
But I don't mean the motion controller. No. I don't mean the motion controller.
The V2 controller.
The actual controller. I see. No. See, there was a confusion.
Gotcha.
The motion controller can't work without integration with the flight controller and position and so forth. That's impossible. Yes. But the standalone, the little gray gamepad style controller.
Yeah.
Do we think that'll bind?
My understanding is all the builds up until like a month ago, it did not work with. And it apparently worked with the V1 controller that isn't even in production anymore. That's what I was hearing.
Interesting.
But I have not talked to any of my inside sources who have used a V2 controller with the O3 Air Unit. It's possible that they are on older builds and that there are newer builds that it works with. I do not know. But I know as of like a month or two ago, those builds did not work with the V2 controller.
There has to be a controller that will work.
Like when we saw, like, iFlight posted pictures that I'm testing the new Air Unit, and it was with the iFlight Commando radio, So, like, I don't know. But, like, my understanding is that it didn't work not that long ago. So I hope it will. There's no reason I would think it wouldn't.
There has to be a controller that works with it because Junis in the chat says there is definitely S-Bus stuff in the code.
There's definitely an S-Bus wire. I can tell you that too. Like,
and DJI wouldn't force you to use a third-party controller and receiver. So presumably it's going to be the V2 controller that works with the Avada, but we don't know that for sure.
The obvious information would be that we just can't tell you that 100%.
Okay. Okay. Well, I hope that that's true, and I hope that next week or the week after we are cheering that the O3 Air Unit is out and the backwards compatibility has been delivered and yada, yada, yada.
For the lack of leaks that we have, they're everywhere. I mean, iFlight has had them in bind and flies for a month or 2 months or maybe longer. They've been sending them out to people. I know multiple creators have bind and fly iFlights, so they're out there. I have to assume if it's not soon, like, it's got to be real soon. They're going to be doing it as soon as they can push it out, I think.
Okay. So, all right.